Long ago, our people came across the Bering Land Strait, a connection of an icy frost land bridge that connected from Russia down to northern Americas. The earliest signs of people found in the Americas is close to 13,000 years ago. An anthropologist looked back in an old cave in the Yucatan where he had to scuba dive hundreds of feet down, and he found a set of bones, which were of a young girl, probably in her 16, 18-year-old body frame. He had to go into this cave underwater, scuba dive down, grab the bones, and he found the age of this woman. And this woman was her bones were close to 13,000 years ago. Now that's the earliest signs of people in the Americas. All the way down in Mexico, close to 13,000 years. That means that people have slowly traveled from Canada to the United States, through Mexico, all the way down to the southern tip of Mexico in the Yucatan and Cancun, and they found bones there. So that means humans have possibly been in America close to 16,000 years ago. Close to the end, I would like to say, of the Native Americans or Americas, those people down from north to central to south started to face their end towards the late 1400s and 1500s. Long ago, as everybody probably knows, the Aztec and Mayan empires lasted for close to almost maybe about 300 to 400 years. Before they were considered Aztec, there are obviously tribes that their names probably will never be remembered ever because I don't even know who they are. But the Aztecs were one of the main people who were remembered, not because simply of their pyramids, but because the Spanish were one of the first people to record of them. Yes, the Aztec did have temples that, of course, people would wonder who they were. But the one people to give them the name the Aztecs weren't the Aztecs to give them their name. The Spanish gave them that name. To say Aztec in an actual Nahuatl language is probably very difficult and don't even know how to say it. But the Aztecs and Mayan cultures have lived for a long, long time and have dominated the Central American landscape for many, many years. And obviously, a lot of their ways of ruling over tribes and such neighboring people is not to completely dominate them, but to have them as tribute to the king. Now, if you know, one of the kings was Montezuma, and he obviously had a second son. The second, I believe he was the one who died in the hands of Cortez. But I just wanted to explain a little bit about the Aztec because they not only took over most of Mexico, they also took over a lot of Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua and El Salvador. Now, the reason why I say that they were able to conquer that is that the Nahuatl language is one of the most native and oldest languages spoken in Mexico, and that is one of the main languages that Aztec spoke. Now, you can find evidence of that language being spoken all the way down to about Nicaragua, and then it ends there. And then you come across a bunch of other languages that are mainly influenced by the Incan tribes, which is down in Peru. They also, too, ruled a lot of the neighboring countries, but we won't get into them. We'll get into mainly Central America. One of the native languages in Nicaragua is Nahuatl, and mainly on the western side of Nicaragua. Now, there's not a lot of history of Nicaragua because mainly because the main state, the main capital of the Aztec people were in Mexico City, which I guess in Nahuatl language is Chinutlan or something like that. And obviously they were a great people. That was their main city, and I can imagine that not a lot of people there cared about you know, the distant tribes out there in Nicaragua way into the distance, as they were probably the fading Nahuatl people that didn't really need to worry about because they were hundreds and hundreds of miles away and not as fearsome as the Aztecs. Now, one of the people that are remembered in Nicaragua are the Nicaragua, which is Nicarao, Nicaragua. And it is said in Spanish conquistador history that in about the 1520s, a man by the name of Gil Gonzalez Davila showed up there and towards his conquest as he wanted to go up north from, I believe, Colombia, and go from Colombia, which was one of the main capitals of Spain at the time when they established in the Americas. And he wanted to be one of the few people to venture up north, go from Costa Rica, where he came across through Costa Rica and actually had a decent time meeting the native people there, made some friends. And he made his way through there by excursions, riding up north through the coast on the western side of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. He met people, and they greeted him a lot with gold. And of course, this man wasn't a good man. Okay. One of the main things that is known about the conquest of Spanish rule is that it was about 300 years of complete assimilation to Catholicism from whatever native people were, uh, they were practicing to, and a lot of the kings of the time were killed and even tricked in so many different ways by the Spanish in order for them to conquer all of Central and South America. Now, the Spanish came across Nicaragua, which there we came across a great leader, which his name was Nicaragua. And he ruled somewhere on the western side of Nicaragua near Lake Nicaragua, where there's two islands and they're volcanoes. I believe they're not active. He came across these people, and at the first time when they recorded him, he was a great big tall man, muscular fella with kind of a adornishment across his head, feathers, showing a lot of skin and a little thing covering, little loincloth covering his body. And at the beginning, they greeted Nicaragua with good consciousness as they had interpreters of the Nahuatl language. And shortly then after, as they decided to leave, Nicaragua decided to try to kill Gil Gonzalez. Long story short, Gil made it. Nicaragua shortly got killed by the Spanish as they sent another conquest up there and assimilated the Nicaraguan people. Granada of Nicaragua was actually one of the main posts of Spanish at one point, or it was one of the main capitals at one point. They believe they called it New Granada. Anyways, the Nicaragua people were one of the few people on the western side, and what is not known about Nicaragua is that at one point it was also ruled by the British on the eastern side, which is called the Mosquito Kingdom. As people don't know about that, is that a lot of the eastern side of Nicaragua, which is very swampy and has a lot of estuaries and somewhat hot and tons of fucking mosquitoes. And those people, the British Kingdom, the British Empire came across uh, the ruler of the Mosquito Kingdom, which was called an old man, which was also a great big dude. And he was known as the king of that place. And they somehow befriended him. They made friends with him. And, the British ruled there for, I don't even know, they just let go of the British Kingdom, of the old Mosquito Kingdom, probably around 1921. So it wasn't too long ago that the British let go, even though Nicaragua was its own country and declared independence around 1821. So, with that being said, kind of to the point, right? But see, Nicaragua doesn't just have an untold native history, because one of the things is that's known about the Spanish conquest of Nicaragua is that it nearly wiped out all of its inhabitants down to about less than 30,000 people. Now, how many people were in Nicaragua at the time? It's kind of unknown, but I believe it was close to 1 million, as all of Central America was thoroughly inhabited by native people on both sides of Nicaragua. And for them to be encountered by both Spanish and British influences, I imagine that Nicaragua was a well populated place, not only by their standards, separated by a lot of geographical things like mountains, volcanoes, swampy areas. Imagine there's a lot of people. Well, they wiped us out down to less than 30,000. Then you say, where's the history of Nicaragua? Where were these people? Now, if you go to the volcanoes of Nicaragua and Lake Nicaragua, you can find really old, like, type of carvings on the side of mountains that could be dated back to really long time ago before the Spanish arrival, which they were also very similar to Aztecian type of things, but a little bit different. After the Spanish, ruled for about 300 years, and finally Nicaragua declared their independence alongside with tons of other countries that could declare their independence around 1820. Mexico, you name it, Guatemala, tons of places did it. It was a revolution. And you can imagine that a lot of these Spanish conquests that came here fought alongside a lot of people, French, Portuguese, British, US powers, all fighting for this new land and taking up the inhabitants, taking out the people and simulating them. Of course, killing everybody, plaguing them with smallpox, and just completely battering them with guns, which we didn't have. Now we didn't, no, Native people at the time didn't record a lot of history, so a lot of the history was recorded by the Spanish, and of course they interpreted the names that they met at the time with those people into Spanish. So we don't know truly what was their names or what it could really be, who these people really were, which is sucks, because a lot of people know about the Aztec history. A lot of people know about the Mayan history, but no one knows about the other central states. And all you really know is that they spoke Nahuatl, and they also probably could have been influenced by the Aztec Empire, but who else? They probably could have been a fierce tribe. But Nicaragua's torment from other people doesn't stop there. Once they declared their independence, now the Spanish, let's get into the Spanish. The Spanish obviously had rule over all these places in Central and South America. And eventually they became up with a treaty in 1422 with the Portuguese that they can keep most of South America while the Spanish will keep a lot of northern Central America and northern South America. With that being said, at the same time, towards the very end of Spanish's rule, you have the US stepping in and ruling a lot of the eastern side of Northern America. Now, after the Spanish, I mean, the American Mexican War, they solidified the eastern connection from Atlantic to Pacific for the US, which kind of solidified any influence from Spain whatsoever in the Americas, which kind of really solidified US's power over Central America and South America. Kicking those people out and having the independence of these countries. Remember, America didn't really have any, there was no thought of an America back when Spanish was ruling in the 1500s. The reason why the Spanish went out to the Americas is because they had Christopher Columbus go out to find new trade routes because the Ottoman Empire was taxing the shit out of the Spanish, and they couldn't get anything from the west to the east to do any trade with the Chinese. So they sent Christopher Columbus to find another trade route to India, which he did not find it. He ended up going and landing somewhere near Panama or something like that, and landing there and basically reporting back that, we didn't find it, but we found this place. And these people can also be slaves too. Check them out. They're like fucking 4 foot tall. They'll do anything I say. They're sick though, but hey, they'll work and they have gold. So once the Spanish decide that they don't need to worry about any trade with the Chinese, they start literally exploiting all of America's plunders, gold, silver, people, assimilating them to Christianity. But after their 300 years of rule from about, the 1400s till about, the late 1700s, you have finally the independence of these countries coming into play. And then also shortly after, as Mexico is finally slowly doing its own revolution in its own country from Spanish rule, Mexico gets in a war with US. As US sees as Spanish is ruling California, how can they take over California, get the gold, and also solidify their expansion out west? They conquered, they beat Mexico, destroyed all of Spanish rule, literally helped the revolution of Mexico. Mexico is then left alone. All the other Central American countries are then left alone. And then all of a sudden, you have America thinking about how can we remain powerful. Well, America's thinking, well, we need to influence these countries down here and make sure they don't fall into communism or socialist ideas. They too can become a threat, becoming connected to our lands. So America starts to influence and make treaties and make a lot of allegiances with these countries. In the process of making allegiance and making things better, America, instead of thinking about how to travel across from east to west, because there wasn't trains at the time, only boats, America thinks that we need to build a canal. Well, before this canal idea was being thought out, there was a man by the name of William Walker. William Walker was a young man who was ambitious, and he was a Southern man, and he wanted to become president, wanted to become governor, but his likelihood that wasn't going to happen. There was new ideas forming and a lot of people trying to corner the market of industry, not having to trade with certain people of certain allegiances towards the European and Asian people. So America is exploiting also the trade of the people of Central America and South America. Also, they want to make things faster. They want to be able to export things faster through different routes instead of crossing all the way to the tip of Chile down south and to get to the other side and western side of America. They decided that they want to build a canal. Now, William Walker decides to go down to Nicaragua. He's an ambitious man. He goes down there with tons of soldiers. And he goes down there with a couple of Mexican veterans from the Mexican-American War in order to translate. William Walker has the idea to take over Nicaragua and become president. Well, that didn't go so well for him. Even though he did have a major influence in there for almost about a couple of months, they finally found the guy and executed him there. Now, it wasn't Nicaragua alone. The Americans stepped in to make sure William Walker was handled. And ever since then, U.S. has had an occupation in Nicaragua. Not a bad one, but to set some standards. It was an idea at one point that they were going to build, instead of building the Panama Canal in Panama, they were going to build the canal in Nicaragua. It was going to go right through Nicaragua, through a couple of rivers, and use the large Nicaraguan lake as a bay and cut right through the little spot, the little I don't know, land bridge that's there. Well, those plans didn't work, and engineering could have been possible, but Nicaragua wasn't a fit state to do that because at the time it was slowly being influenced by socialist and communist parties. Eventually, Nicaragua has always been slowly occupied by U.S. to fight its ports, to fight its social occupation of any kind, socialist or communist occupation. At one point in the 70s and the 60s or 70s, Nicaragua, in the 80s, excuse me, Nicaragua and the U.S. had a big problem. As everybody knows, there was a war in drugs. There was also a war in any type of communist, socialist parties. And at the time, a lot of communist people were getting involved with Nicaragua because of the Somoza regime. Somoza was a person who was really involved, right, with the country of Nicaragua, but got involved on two different sides, as there was a lot of things taking place in Cuba between Russia and those types of people. Nicaragua is a great place as well as an asset towards those things, those communist things. Well, Somoza was very heavily influenced in communist ideas, and a lot of the people there did not like that, which rose the Sandinista Party, which started a huge war between the two parties, where the Americans helped Sandinista become ruler, become a president there. And eventually, he was also contested by the Contras. The Sandinistas then were in power, and the Contras came in. But the Contras were also assisted. The Contras were also assisted by the U.S. with guns being flown in. Now, a lot of people know that story. It's a really big, big story. It's been told many, many, many times. Well, a lot of people don't know is that there was a big big, federal court case or whatever between the UNs, between Nicaragua and the U.S. And in that treaty, there's a big treaty between all the countries of the UN. The people who are a part of this cannot declare war or in any type of way influence each other by standing on their soil. So the U.S. can't physically be on their soil and do any type of thing that can declare war or any threat. Okay? But the US, what they did was they partnered up with some folks and decided that they were going to help the Contras infiltrate the Sandinista army and help them with arms, with training, with guns, and even with drugs for them to have power. With that being said, a lot of people don't know that the U.S. faced a lot of criticism in the UN for getting involved with Nicaragua's governing parties, which led to the Contras fighting the Sandinistas, which took over some time, which they too became corrupt, and the Sandinista party came back in, which they've been ruling ever since. The U.S. has went to court to fight this case because the U.S. were indirectly involved, not by stepping on soil, but by giving the guns, which is now an amendment that you cannot. That's one of the main things that countries do in order to not, um, to not get, to not overrule that treaty. You're not putting boots on soil, and you're not sending people there to fuck up the government, but you're sending arms, you're giving people money. That is not betraying the UN. So that's how the US kind of got out of that, even though it was a big thing because they literally created the Contras, and that was the problem. Is that the Contras were almost a byproduct of US coup ideas. So since then, Nicaragua has always been a country that has been exploited, and its resources and people always screwed over by so many folks. It's crazy, which all the other Central American countries have experienced pretty much the same type of problems. El Salvador, especially with America, Mexico with America. But now you think about how can we connect Nicaragua to America? Well, I pretty much gave it to you. Nicaragua and America have always had some type of ties, some type of involvement, some type of relation, some type of demonstrations, and all types of things. Why is America getting involved? And it's because to, of course, to solidify their power. And it's been known in history. Why? That's not even a problem. The issue is when I born here, man, and I want to make sure that it's understood. We're a country born here. You know, I didn't choose to be. I'm here, man, and I love America. I love this place, and I love the things and freedoms that I get. But one of the things that I do notice is that no matter what, always all types of folks who, if you're not like a real looking um, demographic of what people idealize as being American, you're not seen as a true American. And I think that ideology sucks because just like Theo Vaughn says, man, like we're gonna be beige. We're all gonna be one color and one point, and that's true. Assimilation of other countries in Central America face the same um, mixing. The native people were short, hairless people, you know, stocky, where the Spanish were like big, hairy guys. And they all came there and slowly had viceroys and people intermingling and marrying and all types of things, and slowly created this Spanish looking person. Where now Mexico has a look to them compared to other countries. But if you go to Mexico or you go to other countries, they look so different in all different ways, but they're still brown, you know? Same thing for African American folks, where if they go back to Africa, everybody has a different feature about them depending on where they're from, right? The crazy thing is that we are still considered white in America. I'm considered a white person, but I'm a byproduct of war and conquest. I'm born here and I have the rights to do what I need to do in order to conquer my life and conquer the things and God given things that were given to me, as pretty much the Constitution almost says. I want to make sure that my color has no fucking problem with that. And even though some people would say it doesn't, it still kind of fucking does. It's kind of crazy. Where is the representation? There's always a strong representation of other cultures in America except for Hispanic culture. I really do feel that. Asian people got Chinatown, Japantown, Koreatown, Little Vietnam. Italian people got Little Italy. Every Irish place got a Dublin in America somewhere. They got a holiday. BLM fought for Juneteenth, MLK Day. All the white shit that's out there, it's ridiculous. But where is the Hispanic? I mean, of course, you're going to have Hispanic barrios. That's because we fucking live there. But they don't got a Hispanic Day. They don't got they just got Cesar Chavez Day. Cinco de Mayo, which is not even a real Hispanic holiday, not a real Mexican holiday. It's because not too long ago, America was at war with us, man. And it's going to take a while for America to be okay.